go over at one time.
Thank you, Dana.
But sure and pronounce them.
Good morning. The committee will come to order. Pursuant to notice, the Committee on Science and Technology meets to consider the following measures. H.R. 2698, the Federal Aviation Research and Development Reauthorization Act of 2007, and H.R. 487, recognizing the contribution of modeling and stimulation technology to the security and prosperity of the United States and recognizing a modeling and stimulation as a national critical technology. And let me thank the members for coming here this morning. So that we've got lots going on. There'll be a vote in about an hour, but I think we can take care of our business within that period. So again, thank you. We will now proceed with the markup. Today, the committee is meeting to mark up two good bipartisan pieces of legislation. The first bill we will consider today is H.R. 2698, the Federal Aviation Research and Development Reauthorization Act of 2007. And H.R. 2698 was introduced by Chairman Udall. The Space and Aeronautics Subcommittee met last Thursday to consider H.R. 2698 and favorably reported the bill by a voice vote without amendment. I want to thank and congratulate the members of the subcommittee for their hard work and bipartisan cooperation on this bill. There are two central features of this legislation before us. The first is a set of provisions intended to strengthen both the the authority and the accountability of the Next Generation Air Transportation System Joint Planning and Development Office, JPDO, because its success or failure is going to determine in large measure whether or not the nation will have a safe and efficient air traffic management system in the future. And let me just say, this is a big deal, bigger than we're making it today. It is imperative that for both the aviation industry as well as our nation at large, we have this next generation air traffic control system, and it, by and large, it's going to be developed by virtue of the R&D we're going to provide here in the FAA bill as well as in the NASA bill. So we're going to play a major role, and this is important to the country. The second feature is a 4-year authorization of FAA's research and development activities, including the establishment of important new research initiatives on the impact of space weather on aviation, the impact of aviation on the climate, research, and runway materials and engineering materials, restraining systems, among others. This FAA authorization expires this year. That's why it's important for us to move forward. And the reason it's important is that we have the option of going to the conference with transportation either without a bill or with a bill. And I think by us putting a mark in the sand today, it's going to make us more relevant in being able to do that. Our friend and colleague, Mr. Costello, isn't here, but I was hoping he would come so we could give him a lesson on legislating so that he could get it out of his committee also. I'm sure he will finally get here, and at which time we'll give him some pointers. But again, this is important. This bill will expire, and we have the option of either participating or not participating, and I think we are doing the right thing, and I thank you for that. So I urge my colleagues to support this very good bipartisan bill. Today we will also take up H.Res. 487, recognizing the contribution of modeling and stimulation technology to the security and prosperity of the United States and recognizing modeling and stimulation as a national critical technology, as well as the thousands of Americans who work to develop this project. This is an underappreciated but fundamentally important area of research to our country, and I urge my colleagues to support this measure. I now recognize Mr. Hall to present his opening statement.
I thank you, Chairman Gordon, for the chance to make some opening remarks about today's markup. Federal Aviation Research and Development Reauthorization Act of 2007 and H.Res. 487, recognizing the contribution of modeling and simulation technology to the security and prosperity of our country. These are two very important pieces of legislation, as you pointed out, that have been worked out in a bipartisan fashion. I believe the FAA legislation will do a great deal to improve research and development in aviation, and I'm proud that this committee is advancing this legislation. I'm also very supportive of the resolution co-sponsored by my good friend, Mr. Feeney, which praises the good work of modeling and simulation technology. Mr. Chairman, as always, look forward to discussing these bills further as we move through the markup today, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Without objection, members may now place statements in the record at this point. We will now consider H.R. 2698, the Federal Aviation Research and Development Reauthorization Act of 2005. I yield to the gentleman from Colorado 5 minutes to describe his bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you've indicated, H.R. 2698, the Federal Aviation Research and Development Reauthorization Act of 2007, was passed out of the Subcommittee on Space and Aeronautics on a voice vote last week. I especially want to thank Mr. Feeney, the ranking member of the subcommittee, and my colleagues on both sides of the aisle for the bipartisan approach that we've all taken towards this legislation, and I hope we can continue that approach today. This bill will help ensure that the FAA has the tools it needs to keep the nation's air transportation system safe, efficient, and environmentally friendly. It reauthorizes important R&D activities at the FAA, starts up new initiatives in key areas, and contains provisions to strengthen the Interagency Joint Planning and Development Office, which has responsibility for planning and developing the next generation air transportation system. NextGen, as it's known by, will replace the nation's current air traffic management system, which is being pushed to its limits and will be unable to satisfy the projected demand for future air travel. The JPDO, this Joint Planning and Development Office, must integrate the work of numerous agencies on complex projects. The bill will help strengthen the JPDO and increase its effectiveness. The bill also recognizes that the FAA, in coordination with other agencies, plays a critical role in supporting other important aviation R&D activities that the General Accounting Office and FAA's own R&D Advisory Committee say have been underfunded in recent years. One such issue is aviation emissions, which has been receiving a lot of attention lately. For example, the European Union may impose penalties on aircraft emissions in the next decade, and we should address this issue proactively. The bill takes the first step of directing the FAA in coordination with other agencies to develop a research plan, and by having the National Research Council carry out an independent assessment of that plan. Our colleges and universities play an important role as well in research to support the nation's future air transportation system, research that, as it's underway, helps to train the next generation of scientists, engineers, and aviation specialists. That's why the bill authorizes a university research grants program and strengthens the FAA Centers of Excellence program. And again, I want to thank Mr. Feeney for his work on that latter issue. The bill also contains R&D provisions to continue engine research to help enable existing general aviation piston engine aircraft to operate with unleaded aviation fuel. I'd like to thank Mr. Lipinski for his important efforts on this provision. The chairman mentioned that space weather is becoming even more critical to aviation as more planes fly over the polar regions. The bill establishes a multi-agency research program to study the impacts of it on the aviation system and on air passengers and crews. It's clear that the nation's air transportation system is critical to our economic well-being, our international competitiveness, and our quality of life. I believe that this bill will keep the FAA's R&D enterprise healthy and productive. We've received letters of endorsement from several organizations, including the Aerospace Industries Association, the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, the Airports Council International, the American Meteorological Society, the Colorado Department of Transportation, I had nothing to do with that, and the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. In conclusion, I think that this is a good bipartisan bill, and I'd urge my colleagues to support it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Udall, for your good work on this bill. Mr. Hall is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I thank you for scheduling the markup today. Legislation reorganizing the Federal Aviation Administration's research and development programs for the years 2008 through 11. Let me just say at the outset that I support this legislation, and I urge all the members to support it as well. It's a very good bill. Authorizes a total of $1.88 billion in R&D spending over 4 years. Now, while this number may appear to some to be fairly substantial, of course it is substantial, but when compared to overall spending requested by the FAA, R&D funding is about 3.5% of the agency's annual spending. This is an extraordinarily small amount for an organization that is heavily dependent on maintaining a national network of communications, navigation, and surveillance technologies, as is the FAA. And it's possible only because of its R&D work as performed by NASA. H.R. 2698 fully funds the administration's budget request for FAA R&D and includes several increases for R&D projects that total $117 million over the life of the bill, or about 6.5% above the administration's request. It also assumes full funding responsibility for two important R&D activities. Those are the Joint Planning and Development Office and the Center for Advanced Aviation Systems Design. This bill before us this morning is comprehensive and makes a number of needed improvements, but in the time remaining, I'll confine my remarks to provisions dealing with the Joint Planning and the Development Office. The Federal Aviation Administration manages the safest and busiest airport system in the world, and all indications point to a doubling of the number of users within the next 10 to 12 years. The biggest R&D challenge confronting the FAA is keeping pace with this growth before routine gridlock pervades our entire airspace system. 4 years ago, during the last reauthorization cycle of FAA programs, this committee authored the provision creating the Joint Planning and Development Office, and that was directed to coordinate the design and development of a next-generation air transportation system that will, by the year 2025, be capable of handling 3 times the current level of traffic without any degradation in safety. The Department of Defense, Homeland Security, Commerce, Transportation, as well as NASA and the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy all play key roles in this endeavor. The bill before us this morning strengthens JPDO's ability to coordinate and direct these agencies as they work together to develop the next generation system. It directs the JPDO to establish a clear set of milestones. It strengthens the roles and responsibilities of the office's top management, and it directs participating agencies to designate and hold accountable a senior career official tasked with managing JPDO-related activities. These are good and necessary improvements. As noted in your opening statement, this bill also makes a number of other improvements that will give FAA the tools it needs to keep our airspace system the safest and the most efficient in the world. Before closing, I do want to note for the record several concerns raised by NASA regarding a small number of provisions in this bill. Before it goes to the House floor, I want to express my hope to the Chairman that he would work with us to address them as best we can. Mr. Chairman, I want to take a moment to highlight the close and cooperative work of the majority staff in putting this bill together, particularly Dick Oberman. Throughout this entire markup process, Dick consulted with our staff frequently and openly, seeking the minority's input on the bill's provisions and report language. All committee staff on both sides should survive any negotiations one with the other and should, as these have done, strive to follow Dick's very good example. Thank you, Dick, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back my time.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Let me concur with those statements, and I'm particularly pleased to hear that about Dick Oberman. He is a good professional, and he is a model for all of us to follow. Thank you, Dick. And this is the way we want to do legislation. And Mr. Hall, your concerns about JPDO are also were well said. This is very important to us. Mr. Lipinski, I believe, had a statement to make.
I would just like the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a member of the Aviation Subcommittee of Transportation Infrastructure Committee, I want to echo the Chairman's words about the importance of this bill to the future of our air transportation system. We're also fortunate to have the chair of the Aviation Subcommittee on the Science Committee. I'm sure right now he's working on hammering out finishing the T&I portion of the FAA reauthorization bill right now. Now, in order to improve the safety and efficiency of aviation and limit harm to the environment, it's critical that we invest in research and development, something Mr. Udall had mentioned and emphasized. Now, currently, general aviation piston aircraft operate on 100-octane leaded aviation gas, or avgas. Avgas contains 4 times the amount of lead found in the already banned leaded automotive fuel. It is extremely toxic. 4 times that was found in automobile gas, which we banned a number of years ago. Unfortunately, there's no economical alternative that currently exists. We definitely need to work on changing that. And I'd like to thank Chairman Gordon, Chairman Udall for working with me to include a provision in this bill to continue and enhance R&D for alternative aviation fuels. Increasing R&D for alternative aircraft fuels is crucial if we hope to hasten their introduction into the market and, in doing so, help protect our environment. I'd like to thank Chairman Gordon, Ranking Member Hall, for all their work on this bill and for including this important environmental provision. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Pinsky, and also for doing double duty on this FAA bill on both your committees. We're going to provide a copy of the subcommittee and full committee markup for you to present to Mr. Costello as a model for him to move his work, and we're sure that he'll catch up with us at a later date.
I'm sure he'll appreciate that.
Okay. Mr. Finney, you did a good job on this bill. You want to brag a little bit about it?
Well, no, but I do want to brag on both the majority and the minority staff, and Chairman Udall. I'm very grateful for his leadership, because this really was a bipartisan consensus, and so it was a very easy markup once we got to that. And this is a vital bill. I think that Chairman Gordon said it right. We are making too little out of this, because this is vital to have a system based on next generation leadership that will triple the capacity of our air traffic. That is so important that we do that in an environmentally responsible manner, in a safe manner, and it is critical to the prosperity of our country. I thank my ranking member, Mr. Hall, and again, just want to tell you how appreciative I am of the leadership of Mr. Udall and his staff as we pass a very good bill today. Yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Finney. I think you make a good point. You know, just because we don't yell and holler around here doesn't mean we're not doing important work. We've gotten some good bills out.
Mr. Chairman, I can yell and holler if it will help.
I hope that won't be necessary. Save that for another committee. Does anyone else wish to be recognized? We'll get to your amendment in just a moment, Ms. Chandler. Is that what you wanted to do? Okay. I ask unanimous consent that the bill is considered as read and open to amendment at any point, and that the members proceed with amendments in the order of the roster. Without objection, so ordered. The first amendment on the roster is the manager's amendment offered by the chair. The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 2698 offered by Mr. Gordon of Tennessee.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. I recognize myself for 5 minutes to explain the amendment. I have what I believe is a straightforward amendment that makes a number of technical corrections to the bill, as well as clarifies several of the provisions of the bill. The amendment clarifies that the bill provides new funding authorizations for the research initiatives included in Section 4J, 5, 6, 10, and 13. It also clarifies that we are directing JPDO to establish noise, emission, and energy consumption objectives in Section 4H. In Section 5, it makes clear that we are not prejudging the results of the Interagency Research Initiative into the impact of aviation on the climate. Finally, the amendment makes explicit that the bill's presumption that unmanned aircraft systems are to be integrated into the national airspace system in a manner that does not degrade the system. I have worked closely with the minority in crafting this amendment, and I appreciate their assistance and their good ideas. I believe that this is a non-controversial amendment, and I would support or urge your support. Is there further discussion on the amendment? If not, the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The second amendment on the roster is offered by the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Chandler. Are you ready to proceed with your amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. There's an amendment at the desk, and I would like to ask for unanimous consent to dispense with the reading.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, sir. As we all know, everybody, I think, has a great deal of concern for air safety in this country. I have a particular concern now because the last very large air disaster occurred in my district in August of last year when 49 people were killed. I hope it will be the last such event for a very long time in this country, and I hope that we can do what we can to see that that's the case. This amendment that I am offering would mandate an independent assessment be made of the FAA's aviation safety-related research programs. This assessment would be made by the National Academy's National Research Council. The assessment will investigate whether the FAA's research programs are working effectively and will ensure that there are mechanisms in place for implementing this research into the FAA's safety operations and their procedures. Specifically, the safety-related research programs that the Council will review focus on issues such as air traffic control and technical operations, runway incursion reduction, and human-to-machine interactions. Neither I nor my staff have been able to find any record of any prior independent assessment of the FAA's safety-related programs. I am determined to find every way possible to work toward better safety in our nation's skies and airports, and I believe that this amendment gets to the heart of FAA aviation safety and provides a much-needed independent review. I also want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your assistance in working with me on this, the ranking member and the chairman and ranking member of the subcommittee. Thank you.
Thank you for that explanation, and now the clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 2698, offered by Mr. Chandler of Kentucky.
I ask unanimous consent that we dispense with the reading. I think Mr. Chandler has done a good job of explaining his bill. Does anyone else wish to make comments? If there's no further discussion, then the vote will occur on the amendment. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no.
Thank you.
The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The third amendment on the roster is offered by the gentleman from Utah, Mr. Matheson. Are you ready to proceed with your amendment?
I am ready, Mr. Chairman, and I do have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 2698, offered by Mr. Matheson.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The amendment is actually quite simple. It asks the FAA to prioritize noise pollution when redesigning commercial airspace. Though safety should be the most important consideration in airspace design, I think the consideration of noise pollution is also essential in order to provide the public with the best possible airspace design. Currently, the FAA's only priority in assessing airspace design is safety, which should certainly be the #1 concern. However, there should be an effort to ensure that the public is happy with decisions that affect their communities. Airspace redesigns that do not consider noise pollution in their environmental impact studies can be delayed by litigation, and in fact, I bet we all have a story where they have been delayed by litigation. In my own district, we are locating a new airport in the town of St. George, and it was an 11-year process, and noise pollution issues, which ultimately were resolved, and that's the good news, is everyone's happy. But if they received a greater priority and emphasis at the front end, that 11-year process could have been completed in a more reasonable time frame. So reducing noise pollution should be an important consideration at the front end of airspace design. It's a good first step towards finding solutions where everybody feels satisfied with the outcome. So this amendment requires the FAA to take a more serious approach to noise pollution, which is an issue that I think we all can relate to, and I hope my colleagues will join me in supporting the amendment. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your cooperation on this and your staff, and I'll yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Matheson. I think you did a good job with the amendment and also describing it. Does anyone else?
Would I just speak on Mr. Matheson?
Oh, certainly, yes, Mr. Rockman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to speak in favor of the gentleman's amendment. You know, for many years, those at the FAA assumed that people who cared about noise pollution were living in densely crowded spaces immediately adjacent to airports, and it was just a niche, a little group of people unique to a couple of places around the country. They were wrong then, and they're wrong now. Mr. Matheson is rightly pointed out here. He represents the state of Utah, not exactly the most densely crowded state in the country. The state of Utah, the people there are concerned about their quality of life, and they're fed up with the stress, the unnecessary stress of airplane noise in their busy, already stressful lives. So it's well past time for the FAA to get the message that everyone in America is fed up with airplane noise, and it's time for FAA to join with Americans across this country and help us solve this problem while addressing the other responsibilities of the FAA. But, as I've said before, Mr. Chairman, commerce interstate or otherwise, serves the quality of life. That's the purpose of commerce, to enhance the quality of life of the people. When commerce is so poorly managed that it is destructive of the quality of life of the people, then it needs to be fixed and addressed. And when the management of our aviation system is so poorly managed that it destroys the quality of life of the people across the country, from Utah to New Jersey, there should be a clear and loud message that even the FAA can understand. It's time for them to change the way they do business with regards to aircraft noise. And I ask all my colleagues to support the Matheson Amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. Mr. Hall is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I think the gentleman from New Jersey is entirely correct in what he's saying, and I like Mr. Matheson's approach to this amendment, and of course, minorities reviewed it and we urge its adoption, but I think it's good to point out about noise pollution and all the other types of pollution today. I think he's well worded, this one. Noise pollution reduction concerns of affected communities to the greatest extent practicable. And that word practical really belongs in there because, you know, we have offshore rigs all around this country here, offshore rigs that are keeping our kids from having to go overseas and fight a war to get energy for us. And they object to some of those because they say they are, of all things, site pollution. You know, give me a break. If that's site pollution, they ought to envision that offshore rig as it churns out that black gold for people that builds our roads and turns our lights on and off, and the people that work in the energy thrust today, they ought to appreciate it because if they could just envision that's their grandsons in a troop ship 14 miles out there headed east, west, south, or north to get some energy for us when they're out there producing it. As soon as practicable, sure makes sense. Yield back.
Anyone else? Mr. Costello is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I just want to speak in support of the gentleman's amendment and associate myself with the comments made by our friend from New Jersey. The FAA, sometimes it's difficult for them to get the message, and we hope that they get the message here today. And as we move forward with the FAA Reauthorization bill, we hope that they will get the message. Legislation as well. Let me just comment quickly as a member of the Science Committee as well as chairman of the Aviation Subcommittee of Transportation. I strongly support this legislation and not only support the legislation but hope to complement it as we move. No question that this legislation helps modernize our system by reforming the Joint Planning and Development Office by providing much-needed research on avgas. Provides a generous R&D into a variety of other safety issues. These initiatives will continue to improve our aviation system and continue to make it the safest and most efficient in the world. With that, Mr. Chairman, I support the gentleman's amendment and
Thank you, Mr. Costello. We're glad you could join us. Before you got here, there was unanimous consent agreement that Mr. Lipinski would present you with a DVD of our subcommittee and full committee markup so that you could review it in hopes that you would also be able to join us at this conference at a later date. Is there anyone else that has any discussion? If there's no further discussion and the vote occurs on the amendment, all in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Are there other amendments? Mr. Naugebauer.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have another amendment, but I did ask for unanimous consent to strike the last word. One of the things that this research is very important, and recently in my district, we had meetings with people from FAA and DOD and Air Force and NOAA and a number of other agencies about the issue of making sure we have a storing place or a clearinghouse for information as it relates to renewable energy resources, particularly wind energy. As you know, I have one of the largest wind farms in the world in my district, and one of the things that came up is that while the FAA and the wind industry have all been working very closely together, and I'm very proud of the cooperation and that's going on right now. I think the thing that came out from that meeting is that there may be need to have a kind of a clearinghouse of all of the issues as it relates to wind energy and Air Force, operations, FAA operations, and those kinds of issues down the road, so that the private sector and the public sector are working together, and as they have done very successfully. But as we anticipate in emphasis in this country on renewable energy, it may make sense down the road for us to have some discussions on how we can facilitate that. I don't want to create any kind of new bureaucracy at all, but just finding out what is the appropriate agency possibly to be the clearinghouse for that information. And as these important new technologies that this bill will hopefully bring forward, making sure that the information that is developed and the technology is developed, making sure it's compatible with the environments that those are going to operate in, and so that also that the people that are going to building structures in that same environment understand some of the issues as it relates to those infrastructure, operating appropriately. And so down the road, this is a very important bill for the purpose that we need to be on the cutting edge for air safety with our technology, but also making sure that we're sharing that information and also working with the private sector to make sure that everybody's talking and speaking with the same voice and understands the issues as we implement this new infrastructure.
Yeah, you raise a very good point, and your staff put us on notice, and I've tried to think about this, and we really don't have any specific jurisdiction here, but what I think we can do is this. It's more of an interagency problem within the administration. If you can convince your colleague from Texas to join with me, and if you would like to help us, we'll try to write a letter to the administration talking about our concerns here and asking them to get, if it's necessary, some type of a joint group between the various agencies to address it. And if you think that it's necessary, we'll have a hearing on it later. I think that's how we can best serve.
Thank you, Chairman.
Are there any other amendments? Mr. Rothman.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk. I'll ask unanimous consent that the reading be waived.
Amendment to H.R. 2698 offered by Mr. Rothman.
I ask unanimous consent that the reading of the amendment be waived. And
the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I will be withdrawing this amendment. I'd first like to express my thanks to Chairman Gordon and Ranking Member Hall and both the outstanding majority and minority staffs for their hard work in crafting this overall bipartisan legislation and all the cooperation that they continue to provide to me and my staff as we express our views about various matters under the jurisdiction of this committee. Mr. Chairman, as many of my colleagues know, I represent one of the most densely populated regions in the most densely populated state in the nation, New Jersey. And quality of life issues, just as they are important for my friends in Utah and every other state, are very important to me. Today, the committee is presented with an opportunity to help improve the quality of life for people not just in New Jersey, but all over the country. People who live or work near general aviation airports. My amendment, Mr. Chairman, seeks to raise the authorization level for the environment portion of the Airport Cooperative Research Program for fiscal year 2008 from $3 million to $5 million. The amendment expresses the intent of this committee that the additional funding shall be dedicated to noise reduction research in relation to general aviation airports in urban and densely populated areas. While the funding for this program is scheduled to increase to $5 million next in the fiscal year '09 through fiscal year '11, the problem of airport noise and the impact it has on millions of Americans is important enough, I think, to start at that funding level for this coming fiscal year. We were late, Mr. Chairman, in getting this amendment to the committee, and therefore the committee staff did not have enough time to review this proposal. Therefore, Mr. Chairman, I will be withdrawing my amendment and asking the chairman to work with me before the bill moves to the floor to ensure that the funding level for this critical research program is raised sufficiently to improve the quality of life of our constituents who live or work near urban area general aviation airports.
Thank you, Mr. Rothman. As you pointed out, through no fault of anyone, we did not receive this amendment until 8:30 this morning. On first view, it certainly looks like to be a positive amendment. In all fairness, though, I think that the minority needs to have a chance to fully vet it. Once that's done, I feel confident that we can work together to make this a part of a manners amendment at a later date. And thank you for bringing this up.
Thank you. I thank the chair, and I ask unanimous consent to withdraw my amendment.
Without objection, are there any other amendments? If there are no other amendments, then the vote is on the bill. H.R. 2698 is amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. I recognize Mr. Hall to offer a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee favorably report H.R. 2698 as amended to the House with the recommendation that the bill as amended do pass. Furthermore, I move that the staff be instructed to prepare the legislative report and make necessary technical and conforming changes, and that the chairman take all necessary steps to bring the bill before the House for consideration. I yield back.
The question is on the motion to report the bill favorably. Those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The bill is favorably reported. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. Members have 2 subsequent calendar days in which to submit supplemental, minority, or additional views on the measure, ending Wednesday, June the 27th at 9:00 a.m. I move pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 22 of the Rules of the House of Representatives that the committee authorize the chairman to offer such motions as may be necessary in the House to adopt and pass H.R. 2698, the Federal Aviation Research and Development Reauthorization Act of 2005 as amended. Without objection, so ordered. We will now consider H.Res. 487, recognizing the contribution of the modeling, stimulating technology to the security, prosperity of the United States, and recognizing modeling and stimulation as a national critical technology. This, just for your information, this is a bill by Mr. Forbes. The parliamentarian sent it to our committee. We feel that it is a good bill, but we thought it would be best to have someone on the committee that would bring it forth. Mr. Finney has agreed to do that, and so we're glad you could help, Mr. Forbes. And I now yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Florida to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does the resolution need to be read formally before I explain it, or should I weigh in?
I think you can cut loose.
Okay, great. Well, this morning's markup of H.Res. 487 recognizes that modeling and simulation technology is a national critical technology essential for America's long-term national security and economic prosperity. Congressman Randy Forbes, that Chairman Gordon mentioned, a former member of this committee and current chairman of the Modeling and Simulation Caucus, introduced this legislation. I, as a member of that caucus and representing one of the larger modeling and simulation clusters in the U.S., am honored to urge this committee to pass this legislation. Your child's or grandchild's video game represents one product of the modeling and simulation industry. Aircraft training simulators provide another well-known example. I don't know if Ranking Member Ralph Hall used the Link trainer as he prepared for World War II service, but that rather rudimentary flight simulator helped train a generation of military pilots and laid the foundation for this important technology. Simulation uses combinations of sound, sight, and motion to make you feel that you're experiencing an actual event. Modeling involves the complex computer models used to create these artificial environments. For training purposes, modeling and simulation places people in an artificial but seemingly real environment and puts them through their paces. But unlike live training, if you make a mistake, you get to live another day and learn valuable lessons. An inestimable number of lives have been saved that otherwise might have been lost in training accidents while improving the overall quality of training. In the latter part of the 20th century, the U.S. military revolutionized warfighting by emphasizing high-fidelity training that simulates the stress and decision-making of actual combat. Servicemen and women gain experience and judgment previously only earned on the actual battlefield. Substantial amounts of that simulation and training come from my congressional district, where representatives of all service branches collaborate. By the way, it's the oldest joint military facility in the country, with the University of Central Florida and private contractors of all sizes to produce these training systems. Other clusters of modeling and simulation excellence exist throughout the United States. But such training expands far beyond military uses. Medical simulation is an especially promising field. By creating artificial but seemingly real environments, doctors and nurses can hone their skills in using sophisticated and invasive medical technology or in treating severely injured patients. Beyond training, modeling and simulation replicates complex environments, allowing planners and designers to ask various what-if questions. Transportation planners simulate highway networks to determine how to best alleviate congestion. The Illinois State Toll Highway Authority uses simulation to determine how to improve highway signage and reduce crashes near toll plazas. Emergency management experts simulate large-scale natural or man-made disasters to better improve coordinated emergency responses. Hurricane Katrina highlighted the need to better utilize modeling and simulation in order to protect life and property. Because of these growing numbers of uses, the modeling and simulation industry is a rapidly growing industry that demands the best students with extensive math and science backgrounds, including psychology, medicine, computer science, mathematics, engineering, and physics. In these brief remarks, I've used examples of modeling and simulation technology to illustrate its value in our complex and dynamic world. So I urge all my colleagues to support this resolution that recognizes the national critical technology and urges government action in areas of industry classification codes and intellectual property to strengthen America's lead in this technology. I want to thank the chairman and the ranking member, and will yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Finney, for that good explanation. Mr. Hall, did you have anything you would like to add?
No, I think it's very good legislation, and I appreciate the gentleman's time and your cooperation. I yield back.
Anyone else wish to be recognized? Mr. McNerney.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I spent most of my professional career in modeling and simulation, and I can tell you that it's a great activity. It's exciting, and it allows scientists to reach in and see what's going on in very remote processes. It allows developers to understand what's going on with their products. It allows industry a lot of leeway in terms of expenditures. It's a great tool, and the Americans are in the lead in this tool. We need to acknowledge that lead. We need to nurture and stimulate, shall I say, growth of that industry in our country. It also allows our military to understand the impacts of their weapons, and it's a terrific tool that will allow us to maintain our lead in the world in many, many fields. So I encourage my colleagues to support this resolution. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. McNerney. Any other comments? If not, let me just, in conclusion, let me say, I think this really is a good example of what I hope this committee will be known for, and that is a committee of good ideas and consensus. This bill didn't originate from any member of this committee, and so let the word go out if we have colleagues of Democrats, Republicans that have good ideas, and this jurisdiction is here that we want them to bring them forth, and they'll be treated fairly. So now I ask unanimous consent that the resolution is considered as read and open at any point, and that the members proceed with the amendments in order of the roster. Without objection, so ordered. I assume there are no amendments. Without any amendments, then the vote is on H.Resolution 487. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. The ayes have it. I recognize Mr. Hall to offer a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee favorably report House Resolution 487 to the House with a recommendation that the bill do pass. Furthermore, I move that staff be instructed to make necessary technical and conforming changes, and that the chairman take all necessary steps to bring the resolution before the House for consideration. Yield back my time.
The question on the motion to report the resolution favorably. Those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The resolution is favorably reported. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. I move pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 22 of the Rules of the House of Representatives that the committee authorize the chairman of such, to offer such motions as may be necessary in the House to adopt and pass H.R. 487, recognizing the contribution of modeling and stimulation technology to the security and prosperity of the United States, and recognizing modeling and stimulation as a national critical technology. Without objection, so ordered. And now let me thank the members for one more constructive markup, and the committee is adjourned.
Good show.